Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be Board Member Corey Young. Mr. Young. Tonight, our moment of silence will be for two people. The death of Mr. Eris Reed last month. Mr. Reed was a former coach and teacher in Rutherford County Schools and also a principal of Rockvale K through 12 school. He was also assistant principal of Riverdale High School for many years. And the death yesterday of Dot Tucker in Auburn, Alabama. Mrs. Tucker was a teacher and coach and librarian at Rockvale and Thurman Francis Junior High. If you would join the board in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. And thank you, Board Member Jeff Jordan, for bringing this to our attention. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Holliday.
Second.
And tie between Mr. Hodge and Mr. Young. So your choice, Ms. Michaels. On the consent agenda, board members, you have an additional 3 volunteers. I'll read them for the record. Valana Lyons, Siegel High School softball, Joey Trevathan, Riverdale High School baseball, and Kirsten Stansberry, Smyrna Middle School softball. So we'll add that to the consent agenda. And of course, we met Tuesday in work session. Motion. Mr. Estes.
Second.
And Mr. Holliday. Further discussion, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, carries. And we're going to move to online testing. Yes. Mr. Holliday, did you want to carry that?
I will. I'll just share with the those who are watching or those who are gathered here this evening that the board had an active discussion on Tuesday night in our work session that really centered around a sense of disappointment and greater emotions that the online testing problem occurred last week. Mr. Zago did an excellent job of explaining to us the preparedness, and we were very fortunate to have some nice media coverage, and we appreciate our media partners for helping to explain the prepared nature of Rutherford County and what happened beyond our control from the Department of Education and the Vendor Measurement Incorporated. Mr. Odom added to that on Tuesday night that the investment that was made in technology in Rutherford County schools was a worthy investment, and that is certainly the case, and the evidence is clear on that. But Mr. Odom also indicated, and as is typical from his perspective, so tagged in to all of the details and what's to come, that this is a moving target. And there may indeed be developments, and if not later Tuesday evening, certainly by Wednesday morning, there were more developments. And so, Mr. Odom, if you'll share things that have happened since even our discussion Tuesday night.
We have some more information about probably when we can do assessment. We've kind of, looks like published that, we think, starting the 14th of March. Rutherford County just has, we have to receive those paper pencil tests. has to be distributed, counted, everything that we have to do before you take a paper pencil test. So, and we've communicated that to schools, parents, that sort of thing. We have to pick a 4-day consecutive window. So we couldn't be assured, not knowing exactly what day the test would arrive, that we could start it on the 7th, you know. So that's kind of the window that we have to look at. The assessment is, as we're being told, same standards that would have been on the online assessment. So it's not different. It's the format of giving the test is different. It was, I do think the test was really written more for the online because of the editing tools, but our teachers, students have covered this content this year, so I think they'll do very well. There's been 2 or 3 things happened yesterday. You saw that the governor said that teachers would have flexibility this first year whether they want to count 10 ready on their effect score this year or not, so they'll have that option as well as I understand it. About an hour ago, maybe an hour and a half ago, I received another email which said that we should expect something later today, maybe about additional flexibility for students taking the test. And it may be something as simple as increasing some time frames or something, but I don't know what that looks like yet, but it's changing daily. Right now is basically what I can say. But
Well, I asked our chairman and the rest of the board on Tuesday evening that we move this to such a high position on our agenda because it is something that our community definitely took notice of, and it was such a large failure, and we needed to address it as a local board. I won't speak for Ms. Moore, but there was suggestion on Tuesday evening about a resolution that we would send that would express this board's feelings about how these decisions about teachers' inclusion of these scores, students and how they would be impacted with these scores. We've gotten at least one email from the director that said, because this is such a moving target, maybe we might be more effective doing that at a later time when we really understand where it is. And I spoke Tuesday night about that Commissioner McQueen had this before she ever got there. This was something that Kevin Huffman put in place, that we would have this online assessment standard. It does seem that at some point that online assessments, because of the economics of the circumstances, may be a reality that we do have to deal with, but that Commissioner McQueen was decisive in ending the program for this year, and what we're doing now is really what Mr. Zago talked about, is how do we move forward and getting prepared for that. I don't want to monopolize. If other board members have comments, we certainly want that, but I wanted to make sure that our community understood that this board was prepared for this circumstance thanks to our staff and our teachers and our students, and we're going to work through a challenging situation that has been created by education reform that is outpacing the good judgment of teachers in the classroom.
I would like to echo you once again that the technology, though, that was purchased for our students that the commission so generously gave us this year, the approximately $3 million, was put into computers and infrastructure to meet the conditions of the test, but we use it for instruction every day. And I made the statement Tuesday night, if you want to apply for a job in Rutherford County, you're going to have to do it online, Rutherford County Schools. Most any employer in Rutherford County now, their job openings will be online. You'll go in and make your application online. If you take an assessment, it's probably going to be online. If you do safety training, like it is with all of Rutherford County, it's online. And so my statement was, it just would be really disingenuous of us to graduate students from our schools and not let them experience or use the technology. That's the world they're going to be in. So that investment was tremendous. Murfreesboro received $5 million for 8,000 and something students. We received $3 million for 42,000 students, but we put it to really good use. We were ready for the assessment. but we are using it for instruction every day. So that's, and I think the students will tell you that.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday, Mr. Odom, and Mr. Zago. Again, pat on the back for your explanation.
Well, we really did more than that, and Mr. Stego wisely gave us some advice, if all of us remember back, that we needed to ask for $1 million early from the county commission so that his staff would have time to get everything done. And I guess we must be pretty smart because we took his advice, and the county commission agreed. And so really everybody was kind of on the same page here. I want to ask a question about the test. And you said a teacher could use it or not use it. Is that that's an individual choice by the individual teacher, is it not?
Yes,
it's
sir.
not a group.
No, it's individual by teacher, and it would be going to their effect score, is the way I understand it. And the governor did say, because there's something in legislation that had to count 10% for this year and all, but he said they were in the process of codifying any changes that would be in law. So I imagine there'll be a little bit more said about it through the legislature in the next few days. But
Any change, Mr. Zago, on your dates? I know you made an interesting comment Tuesday night about, and I forget exactly what you said, but if a minute comes and goes and it's past, what'd you say?
I basically said that we only have one opportunity to do what needs to be done this minute. If it's gone, we don't have that opportunity.
So you got 4 days. What have you figured out what that's going to be?
So we've got that and we've sent that out. We actually let everything sit for 48 hours to make sure there were no more changes in the 48-hour period. And we had a clean 48-hour period, so we got everything to the principals and test administrators and teachers and everyone else. And we had a slight change today of possible flexibility in some testing times. But other than that, we haven't seen any other thing. To elaborate a little bit on what Mr. Odom, we just got before we walk in here some things about the teacher, accounting for teachers. It appears, after reading that 3 or 4 times with Ms. Barnes, that the flexibility will be just for this year's test, but it will count automatically if it helps the teacher, but if it doesn't, it won't count in. They don't choose. It chooses for them, and that's something that system has done before for teachers. But if those scores are better, then without them, the system will automatically calculate them in. But only this year's scores. And remember, teachers get 3-year scores. If you've been teaching for 3 or more years, you have scores for the past 2 years and this year that average together to give you that one score. Portion of the score that you get.
So, Mr. Zago, if it's a situation then where the teacher this year has them dropped because of the results, will you just factor in the cumulative 2 years, or will it reach out another year?
This afternoon. But if you're a first-year teacher now, you only have this year's scores. If you're a 2-year teacher, you've got last year's average.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you. We have one visitor tonight, Ms. Jill Hall. Welcome, and if you'll come to the podium, and you have 3 minutes, and pleased to have you. If you want to pull the mic down a little bit so you can be heard.
My name is Jill Hall. I'm a mother with 3 boys, a junior, a 7th grader, and a 3rd grader. I'm honestly disappointed that our school system isn't listening any closer to our teachers and our parents regarding the new testing platform. Many believe that smaller steps should have been made to get to this point instead of throwing us into the middle of total dismay. Students, teachers, and parents are all frustrated with how much time has been spent and TN wasn't ready. I understand that you could argue and say that we were prepared, but MIST wasn't, so we want to blame it on somebody else. But TN is who hired MIST, so truly, we didn't verify or vet the company that we hired to be proficient in our ability to provide what they stated. So how can anyone state that they are capable of providing a test that is adequate to appropriately grade our students? There were several attempts made online prior to last Monday from the conversations I've had with teachers, and not one time were they successful in all the students getting on, not one. They've also shared that they are frustrated that they've spent so much time teaching these children how to use the system, how to use the keyboarding skills, how to directly related to this test, and now they're going to have to retrain using calculators and pencils and correct eraser marks in a short amount of time before the testing is up. I've continued to hear that the REA, TEA, and government offices and their organizations discuss allowing a 1 or 2 year waiver for teachers, which is what y'all just discussed. But I was always thinking that the primary concern was the students, yet no one has offered and discussed how the students could get the same waiver. Teachers have been giving benchmarks and other tests associated with the TN Ready test to prepare our students, and total failure is what's been occurring. My junior couldn't be any more stressed out right now over his EOC that will count from his TN Ready test currently, when state organizations are trying to protect our teachers and organizations, and they're calling the system flawed and unreliable. Third graders are going to school crying because they are afraid of failing this test. My 7th grade son shared with me that 2 weeks ago they were taking a practice test in his ELA class, and no one made above a 60. Yet this is being reviewed as possible grades and guidance to the knowledge of our children. I understand that the online system is gone for the year, but the standards aren't. Why would we offer our children a testing platform that would not allow anyone to see the questions being asked to our children? It's absurd to think that teachers, administrators, government officials, and parents who have all asked to see this, but they've been denied. No one is verifying the questions that our children are being requested to write about or questions they're being asked to answer. And MIST is contracting their workers, people who are grading my children's test, from Craigslist. And I quote, "No experience is necessary, and a bachelor degree in any field will do." Teachers have shared that they're frustrated because they're afraid of losing their jobs if they share this information.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. And if you'd like to stay and speak with us after the meeting, feel free to. Okay? We covered quite a bit of this at the work session on Tuesday, so you can go to RCTV and watch that meeting if you would like. Thank you, ma'am. Next is we have as our guest, Mr. Rowling and Dr. Patel. Board member Jeff Jordan had requested a discussion or presentation on concussions, prevention, anything that is being done and anything that we could do to assist. So, Mr. Rowling, welcome.
I'd like to thank the board for having me to talk about our athletic training outreach program, specifically concussion management. I'll start off with impact testing. It's a baseline test that we've started doing about 2 years ago. It's a computer-based test that's a tool in the overall management of a concussion. It's something that helps us not determine if an athlete has a concussion, but manages their recovery time. The athlete scores they receive a baseline score on symptoms, memory, processing speed, and reaction time. If an athlete gets a concussion, they retake the test, and then their scores are compared to their baseline. So it gives them, they compare it to the baseline that they originally took. The sports we test are volleyball, football, girls soccer, both boys and girls basketball, wrestling, baseball, softball, boys soccer, and cheer. Each test is good for 2 years, so the guys retake it every 2 years, so it's, even if they're in middle school, they've got to take it again at the high school level. Each high school and middle school has a system administrator that manages the impact program, and they've got an athletic trainer that's assigned to them to assist if there's any problems or any questions. Dr. Patel is credentialed impact consultant, so he can read and interpret the results. And so if there's any more impact questions, I think he can help out there as well. As far as our county concussion policy, it's required by the state of Tennessee for all athletics. The athlete and parent signature is required for participation annually. There's also a coach's signature that's required before the first practice. And coaches are also required to watch a concussion information video on the CDC website. The coach's information contains concussion facts, recognition, signs and symptoms list, danger signs, suggested return to play protocol, and acknowledgement signature form. The athlete and parent pack contains concussion facts, signs and symptoms, danger signs, reasons to report concussions, and an acknowledgement form. Some of the highlights of this policy: the coaches must remove a player if they show signs of a concussion. An athlete can be examined by an appropriate healthcare provider on the field. And those guys are medical doctors, osteopathic physicians, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, or an athletic trainer. If that healthcare professional determines that a concussion has taken place, they must be immediately pulled from the game or practice and sent to be evaluated by a physician. Once the athlete's symptom-free, the physician will clear them to do a graduated return to play. That's a 6-day process that starts out with gradual exercise and ends up with a return to competition. So any questions as far as concussions or anything?
Would you agree that this problem is going to be more prevalent in the future?
I agree, because our athletes, parents, and coaches are very well educated now compared to what they were 5-10 years ago. So the amount of concussions are probably the same, but the education level of everybody involved is greater now. So
We hear, I'm sorry, excuse me. We hear a very great deal about the NFL. I guess because it's followed so closely by so many people all over the nation, I guess. It's so popular. But the danger, and you just listed a whole bunch of sports, and they had a whole program on the other night that soccer is actually perhaps, you're as likely, at least in soccer, because you don't have a helmet in soccer, and we do have national soccer teams. So, but I was just, it just seems like to me this started, and that really it's always been there, hasn't it? It has.
It has, but again, people are just more educated and more likely to report their symptoms now and not hide it. And there's not any pressure from coaches to hide it. Now the coaches want the kids to report it, to do the right thing for the kids.
Well, many of us in this room, and I'm sure you're with me on this too, we understand that years ago, if you asked for water, you were a weakling, you know. If you were tired, then you don't need to be tired. And if you were too hot, there's no such thing as too hot. Just go ahead and run the lap. Well, or whatever. Well, all that's been gone for years. Any coach that violates those rules and regulations and common sense is not going to be a coach for very long. But it seems like to me we have this concussion thing is starting to really evolve and take root. That we have something here that we need to put a lot maybe more emphasis on. I'm not sure what that is, but we may need to. I'm interested in the two cases that we had this year. Are you familiar with both of them? I'm sure.
More familiar with the high school case than the middle school case.
I found it very ironic that the young man, and you're talking about Baylor, right? And this was on the road, was it not?
They were at Warren County.
At Warren County, and this is Siegel, and his coach, Greg Wyatt, has been an absolute leader in this and in prevention. And I found it ironic that he was a Siegel player. But at any rate, I understand. I was told just this past week that he's doing quite well and will be coming back home for very soon. Is that correct? Do you know?
I don't know the family personally, so I just know what I see in the newspaper.
I was told by one of his teammates that he was doing a lot better, but of course this was devastating to him. And I understand, according to just what I have read in the newspaper, that it was handled perfectly by the sideline coaches and the doctor that was there. Of course, it was after the fact. He didn't return to the game. He reported it himself to one of the coaches. But anyway, I'd like to hear what Dr. Patel has to say, and then I'm going to have an overall question, and maybe anybody else may have something too.
Welcome, Dr. Patel. Good to see you again.
Thank you for having us. To your earlier question or point, Mr. Jordan, I think one thing we're fortunate to have here in the county is we have an excellent group of athletic trainers, and they go out to all of the schools and they support the system and the coaches. I think we are probably lacking is from the medical part of it. I think we can do a better job of standardizing how physicians manage these young athletes. So I think it's a bit fragmented, and that's something that we need to do a better job of. I think the second point is these athletes that are managed on the field, there's an acute level of care that's being provided. However, once they're assessed on the field, what do we have to do off the field, in the office, and get them back into play? And that's the part that I think there has to be much better education from the physician part of it as well.
Did you have a question? I have one. As far as football, of course, soccer, I have two questions. With football, the helmets that we're using, I know they have to be approved and they're appropriate. Is a different helmet part of the answer, or just teaching proper tackling techniques, without the head? Is that the answer, or is it's just that concussions are going to occur because it's such a physical sport?
I think it's the latter point. I think if you look at most of the clinical studies, the helmets have not been conclusively shown to decrease significantly the risk of concussions or the number of concussions. Now, what you'll find, though, and I talked to one of the coaches just a few months ago, is they are teaching kids how to tackle differently, and that's happening also in the NFL, and that's making a big difference. Now, maybe what we may find out in a few months or in a few years, perhaps they'll have different types of injuries. So whereas they were tackling up higher and not having those types of injuries down the road, maybe they'll tackle a bit lower, and those athletes may be more prone to knee injuries or hip injuries. But I think the key thing that Brad was talking about earlier is educating our coaches and educating our athletes and our parents. And I'll say one thing. I've probably managed more than 250 concussion athletes in the past year and a half or 2 years. And it's rare that I have a coach that will call me and ask about getting an athlete back onto the field. I probably have more questions and concerns from the parent about getting their athlete back to play. So I think that's where we need to do a better job of educating the parents. I mean, they're obviously concerned about their athlete, but they also want them back into play. And that's surprising and somewhat shocking to me as well.
Well, they're personally involved.
They are.
And the child wants to play. I mean, I promise you, at 17, I was absolutely invincible.
Indeed.
Nothing would ever kill Jeff Jordan. I knew that, but of course that was foolish. I know that now, but I didn't know it then. My mother told me, but as usual, I paid no attention. Well, I would appreciate it if either one of you would tell this board again, is there some action that this board could take now or in the future that would help this situation? I mean, is there something that we could do? Is our policy okay? I know you just stated a couple of things there, and I appreciate that. But if nothing else, reiterate those. If it's something we should do.
Well, from my perspective, as a parent and as a parent whose two children play sports, and as a physician, I think in working with Brad and the trainers, we do a good job in this county and in this community. There is room for improvement. My fear is a couple of things. One is that there are athletes that are not being properly assessed when they have an injury, and there are athletes that are returning to play in an untimely manner. And the part of that is just the nature of the system. They're not getting assessed properly, and the physician or whoever is assessing them does not know about the standard of care and how we manage concussions in this day and age compared to how it was managed a few years ago, partly with the use of impact, for example. The second part of it is, I think, the education process has to improve. We need to inundate our athletes and our coaches and our parents with more information about concussions. We hear about it, we see it on television, we see it with the NFL, but we need to provide them with concrete information about what it is, what it's not. And it's more than just read this piece of paper, sign it off, and turn it back in. It's more than just a webcast. I can go to the CDC website and read it and sign off on it, but we really need to make sure that they understand the importance of concussive injuries, and not just what happens on the field during game time, but what happens during practice when they're having minor injuries and they're having subconcussive injuries that can lead to cognitive issues. And those are things that parents just don't know about. I wouldn't, if I weren't in the healthcare field, I wouldn't know about that. And I played sports. So I think to your question, it's education, and it's improving what we currently have in place and making it better so that we are the gold standard for the area.
I coached for years. I don't know that I ever had an athlete tell me, maybe one or two, tell me that they really need to come out of the game. And if we were taken out, I've had many of them tell me, I'm ready to go back in. And I think that's an ego problem as much as anything else. Maybe more prevalent with boys and girls, I don't know. Maybe not. But it seems like a player, it's a sign of weakness. And then, so they tell the coach, well, how are you, Billy? And he said, well, I'm fine, coach, I'm ready to go. And back out he goes. And you're saying that we maybe need to do a better job of that.
We need to do a much better job, and I will tell you, it is the culture, even with the athletes now, with what they are seeing in the NFL, in soccer, they are pulling themselves out. I'm on the sideline, and they'll come up to me, or they'll come up to the trainer and say something doesn't feel right, and oftentimes they'll be the first ones to get assessed. And these are MTSU or Swanee athletes that will want to get assessed first and foremost, and they'll oftentimes err on the side of caution. Not all of them, obviously. Some all will keep playing, but many of them, more so now than 5 or 7 years ago, 10 years ago, they'll pull themselves out and want to get checked out medically.
Have you all met with Tim Tackett at all on this subject, our athletic director? What about with coaches as a group? Soccer, or I know you named a bunch of sports a minute ago, but soccer and football, have we met with those coaches on this subject? How do they know about rules and regulations and the paperwork, and where do they get all that?
I think it's part of Mr. Tackett's information packet that he sends out to
Okay.
each year, that they've got to sign off and that they've received the information. And I know during the summer, he does 1 or 2 coaches sessions, and I've talked to Dad about these things as well.
You've talked to him, or you've talked to them? Both? Well, that's okay. That's good. He and I talked briefly a couple of weeks ago about it, and he's very cognizant of what's going on. He's very aware of it. Well, I don't know if the rest of the board, I've kind of monopolized the conversation here because I asked for this, but go ahead.
Mr. Young?
I would be interested in us looking at what type of education we need to go through with our coaches, maybe with our parents and with the players also, and even with the trainers. And if we could develop some type of plan or some type of system to help communicate these issues, I'd be very interested in sharing that with the board and seeing what we can do here to get Mr. Tackett involved and see what we do to further our education. Seems like that's failing.
I've got copies of it with me, but it's parent information sheet. Look for these signs and symptoms. If you see this, you've got to report it. And then it's initial where the athlete initials it and the parent initials it, that they acknowledge that they understand these rules and things like that. And then it's very same with coaches.
But is that adequate training, though? That's what I guess I'm questioning. Is that enough training for our parents to know if one of their kids is having a concussion.
I don't think so, because there's so many variables that go into a concussion that you really can't put everything on paper. If that makes sense.
If you guys got any ideas, I'd be glad for you to share those ideas with us.
Got to be videos and all kinds of material out there for people to view. There got to be.
The CDC has some excellent websites. It's called Heads Up, and there are vignettes and basic information about concussions, and it is applicable for parents as well as for coaches, and it's 15-minute FYI about concussions, and that'd be probably a very good start.
If a youngster comes off the field and he's assessed by the medical doctor that's there, that he likely has a concussion, he certainly highly suspects one. It's going to be how long until, I don't guess you could really say how long, but is there a minimum time before he puts him back in there? Is it a week, 10 days?
Well, once an athlete has a concussion, they are immediately assessed by the athletic trainer. For MTSU or for Swanee, it's me that will typically assess them, and we take them out of play. If anyone has it, they do not go back into play. If it's a high school athlete, if I see them, it's typically the next day. I'll assess them there, and there's a protocol that my office uses. And typically they are out of play for a minimum of 7 days, sometimes 10 days. About 80% of athletes will recover within about 2 weeks. And then we'll use their clinical examination as well as the impact scores to determine when they've recovered. And it's not just physical symptoms, it's also their cognitive symptoms. Both have to get back to their baseline, have to be normal. And then if those things are normal, then they go through a 4 to 5 day exertion. So Jimmy feels better, he's fine cognitively and physically. Then we put him through 4 days of exercise, and he or she should not have any symptoms of concussion during those 4 or 5 days of exertion. Then the athlete is allowed to return to play. So the 3 premises are no symptoms of concussion at rest, and no symptoms during exercise, and no symptoms during cognitive exercise, such as test taking and studying.
So a youngster enters Riverdale High School, and he's going to play football, and he takes a baseline test made up of how many questions and what type of questions, and what are we talking about here?
So this is the impact test. It takes about 20 minutes to administer, and it's basically done on the computer, and it's a bit complex, but they're looking at several different parameters of the brain. It's not so much question and answer. It's diagrams and colors and numbers.
Well, we got computers.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And that we do well.
And no doubt about that.
Yes, sir.
If you don't like the one you're using, we got another one for you. Well, okay, so that test is good for 2 years.
Yes, sir.
So he suffers an injury 6 months later, and he takes this same test, and you compare his answers. And if he has, I guess you got a way of grading it, and if it doesn't look as sharp as the first time, and clearly there's something that needs to be done.
Right. And that's when we'll put them through the protocol, which primarily is rest, and then we'll watch them. The trainer will also watch them. We'll talk to the parents about what to watch for, and as they improve, we'll repeat the impact test prior to them returning to play and make sure it's normalized back to their baseline.
I do perceive that the board would like to have recommendations if there are things that are not being done that you think should be done. I think the board would like to know that. Is that correct?
Well, this board member would. Yeah, I'd just like to know if there's something that we need to do. And these are our children. We got nearly 43,000 of them in school. You know, and you can get a concussion, of course, falling off the back porch or whatever. But I'd like to take care of them as best we can. I know you all sharing that, and I think we've taken mighty steps. I was just talking to my wife this week, and she never wanted my grandson to play football. She never wanted him to do it, and so that meant, of course, that he did it naturally, and he played up through the 6th grade. And when after the 6th grade, he was at Rockvale. He decided I think his coach decided that he would be a much better baseball player than a football player, and that has proven true. He's a senior at Eagleville. Of course, you can get a concussion in baseball too. But my point is that that was 7 years ago, And I worried about injuries too. A concussion never occurred to me. I was worried about his knees. I thought, gosh, if he blows out a knee, he'll ruin his baseball career, which I think he's going to have a good one, you know, but he wants to play. So see, there's that ego thing. He wants to play. So we let him play. Well, at the end of the year, you know, he decided he'd go with baseball. But my point is, just 7 short years ago, I never gave a thought to concussion. I never did. But boy, it's sure been in the news steadily. And I know it's mostly NFL driven, but they've changed the rules. They're always doing something to try to cut down on this violent behavior. And it is a violent game by 350-pound men. And it is tough.
Indeed.
Anybody else? Mr. Holliday?
I just want to echo something that I say often to people that come to our board, and thank you for what you shared with us. But in Rutherford County, we do consider ourselves perhaps the tip of the spear. We'll lean on Riverdale a little bit there. But the education system for the United States of America selected Tennessee for additional funding and for focus. And in the state of Tennessee, when they're looking for a system to take a look at, oftentimes they look at Rutherford County. And my message there is, if TSSAA needs to hear something, if they're somehow deficient, if we're exceeding their standards, if there's a cooperative program that St. Thomas and the medical practitioners could put in place, if there are public service announcements that ought to be there on the cable access channels where people are watching these things that would get the word out, if the thought crosses your mind but you think, what can we do? No. I want you to hear clearly from this board. Bring those ideas and you will find a reception that we are the pebble in the pond and the ripples go around the world. In Rutherford County, when we do something, we produce state champions, we produce national merit scholars, and we make changes happen. So if there are changes you have in mind, bring them to us and we will partner with you, and it will have an impact far beyond what you might imagine.
Thank you. We'll do that.
Anybody else?
I think the education needs to be two-part. It needs to be looked at from a standpoint of preventing concussions, what we need to do to try to help prevent those concussions. And then, of course, when we do have a concussion, what the protocol is there. And I know you guys went into a lot of great detail there explaining that. But if there's anything else we can do to help the concussion prevention, and then once we do identify concussion, we need to know those things.
You know, one thing that I picked up on is our parents of the age now that they are really connected to the internet and things at the school. Actually, and board members, your athletic directors met this week with the thing I was telling you all about, looking at maybe a more of a universal way to they could present their athletic information to parents and all. But what I want to say to you, if there are videos, if there is things that parents are looking for answers to, we'd be absolutely delighted to put that on our parent tab on our website. And as we get more athletic directed sites, to put that on there, because parents really are hungry for information, and we need people like you to tell us what they need to see. And we'd be absolutely partner with you in making links and things to make that happen.
Good, we'll do that.
Dr. Patel, thank you. Mr. Rowling, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Number 9, Mr. Odom.
Number 9 is planner report for proposed and active housing development. Mr. Shane Morgan is with us tonight. For those that are watching us on YouTube or television or something like that, Rutherford County School Board produces annually a 5-year building plan, a proposal. We're pretty good, 2 to 3 years out, but we tend to have much more difficulty when you get out to 4 or 5 because of developments that we do not know about or awareness of. I was at a training today, and one of the fellows doing the training said you need to try to make 80% of your time planning and 20% reactionary, and that's difficult to do sometimes for that to happen. But tonight we have Mr. Shane Morgan, who is our planner, and we're welcome tonight to have Mr. Doug DeMossa here, who is Rutherford County's planner with her, as moral support or whatever to Shane tonight. But I did ask him, as part of your information, for us to know what's going on in Rutherford County as far as developments, how many lots and things are, as we look at our 5-year plan, what do we need to be looking at and where do we need to be looking at it? So, Mr. Morgan, share with us.
Sure. So in putting this together, I kind of got off track. I was trying to show you just how many single lots were available, and after speaking with Mr. Odom, we decided to take a different approach. There are a lot of subdivisions that have many lots, and it's much easier to see it that way. But after we get finished with this, if you want to call me back at my office at a later time and just kind of look at each one of those areas, I don't mind sharing that with you. Rutherford County and all the cities that are available to us have approved more than 6,000 residential lots in the last 2 years. And of those, roughly 1,200 remain in inventory right now. Those are buildable lots. And that's
each one of those developments are one of your blue dots on
yes, sir,
your
that is.
map.
So yeah, you can see kind of where the density is, and as we know through traveling throughout the county, one of the biggest areas you'll see there is Blackman. So looking forward, Rutherford County has, and those same cities are considering, and these are proposed subdivisions, they're not recorded yet, several subdivisions that exceed 140 lots and above. That doesn't mean that that's the only thing they take, because you still have plenty of lots that broke up into 5 or 10 or 100 different. But the impact you're going to see in density is going to be in those 140 and above. And I'll draw your attention to the Smyrna kind of Blackman area out there near Stewart's Creek, the Stewart's Creek complex. We have leading up Almaville Road, which seems to be one of the corridors, several subdivisions that are in a planning phase or another. One, you have 567 lots, another is up over 700, and then even further than that, Linwood, which is right around the corner from Stewart's Creek, that's 1,500 lots. So there's going to be a lot of density right there, single-family homes. I don't know what the commercial looks like, but the single-family homes is where we've got to look. And as Mr. Odoms has said several times, bricks draw, and it's pretty apparent in that case of Stewart's Creek complex that we did just that.
So our planning to build at Rocky Fork was probably a pretty good idea.
I believe
That's
that
where
that's
we are
going to
now.
be, yeah. We're going to need to be able to draw away from those other schools in order to keep it at a manageable state. So all totaled, the potential for increasing the inventory is going to look somewhere around 5,500 to 6,000 new lots available. And of course, that can play out over several years. That doesn't mean that's going to be next year, but it'll be in pretty short order.
But if we did 6,000 in 2 years,
Even if we did
and
6,000.
when I see your 1,200, it's still remaining in inventory.
Yes, sir.
And we're proposing 5,600 in just the ones you have the black dots with.
That's correct.
You know, my math says there's 6,800 right there. The pace is even faster than what we've seen the prior 2 years, possibly.
The other issue is bringing the sewer line from the Stewart's Creek complex all the way out to Independent Hill Road for this 1,500 house subdivision. All of that is going to grow up between.
Yeah, and the sooner they get that sewer out there, the faster it'll grow.
As far as apartment complexes, which are more impactful than a subdivision, are there any on the drawing boards right now?
I saw 3 in this study, in this simple study we did here, that aren't currently being built. but they're all somewhere in the 300 unit level, and it depends on how they break those apartments up to what we're going to get. If they're all college, style apartments, we're not going to get anything from that, or very little. And if they're mostly one-bedroom apartments, we're not going to get anything from that. But if they end up playing out the 2 to 3 bedroom, that's where we're going to see the draw from an apartment complex.
Your estimate again, about for each new house or for each subdivision, about what percent of houses, or when we look at 6,800 homes, how many of those would probably have students in school? How can we quantify that some way?
I looked at several different subdivisions that are well-established, have been there for years, and literally did a comparison of the number of lots in that subdivision to the number of children that are in that subdivision. And usually, it depends on where it's at. The proximity to the school can change things. The income level can change things. But basically, you're looking at anywhere between 7 to 8 children per every 10. So somewhere around 70% in a subdivision.
7 students per 10 houses?
For 10 houses.
We looked at one subdivision, if you remember sometime back, and it was about 38% or so, but that was just one subdivision. We drew it around. And
actually, apartments tend to be less. We're looking more about 35 to 40% in apartments. And that's an overall picture of all of our apartments together, not just one, because, again, the dynamics of the apartment complex, where it's located, who they cater to, is going to change.
If all those line up, that apartment complex is probably built in a year.
It could.
Whereas a subdivision might take 10, 15, 20 years.
Absolutely.
our projection based on prior growth that we shared with you earlier and we've shared with the county commission was within the next 10 years, very close to 12,000 new students, and that's just using the same pattern that we're seeing now.
Right.
And I think the thing that we hear so often, and that you hear sometimes in the newspaper and other areas, well, growth pays for itself. Well, once again, what we see, the local cost, basically per pupil, is a little over $3,000. Of the $8,000 in something we spend per pupil, a little over $3,000 is local. So I can't tell you exactly what the typical real estate tax on a house will be, but I'd say anywhere between $1,200 and $1,600 or $1,800 per year. So the bottom line is just the real estate tax alone will not pay for that growth. And this is where I always do my commercial. Please shop in Rutherford County because we need your sales tax, or it's going to raise your property tax if you don't shop in Rutherford County to make some of this up. As one of the state and one of the nation's fastest growing counties, we're having to react and accommodate to this. So it's very important that we're in this together and we do smart things well to accomplish these things. But questions that you have for Mr. Morgan or Mr. DeMoss is here. If you have another question.
I think you did a very good job.
When we did the,
Never mind.
But not good enough.
well, I'm really trying to help. When we did the census and the redistricting, which has to be done every 10 years, and we finished that, I was really pleased to be on that committee. It was very educational. But at any rate, we finished that in the summer of 2011, I believe, because 2010 figures, and took about 18 months to digest all that. But Mike Curtis had a map at the courthouse, and he's a genius, and it had the number of children in every district at that time, which I found to be most educational. Mayor Burgess thought it was about one child for every 2 houses, on average, but we did hear the other day that his figure is probably closer now today, in today's world, than it was 4 years ago. But I know in the district that we're sitting in right now, which is 13, this used to be in the 13th district. I'm not sure it still is, but it used to be and that was my district, and still is. There were 1,000 youngsters in this district that were Rutherford County schools, not the city of Murfreesboro, because we got Scales and Bellwood and Case and Lane in it, and kids go out private school. Some kids are homeschooled, so forth. But anyway, there was thousands just in our schools, and that's a lot. Now, the one downtown was closer to 38%. Dr. Bullen's old district was because it was very established, old. Murfreesboro family's been there forever, but 70%. The growth is just phenomenal, and it's just phenomenal.
You know, people kind of need to know we're not exactly flying by the seat of our pants when we make projections and look at it, because we use the county's GIS system. They share that with us, so we know from location where subdivisions are. They're plotted. We are then able to integrate, Mr. Morgan integrates our student management system, which has address for students, what grade they're in, what age they're in. So he can very easily and accurately tell for students that attend Rutherford County schools, he can then plot how many are in this subdivision, where they are, what age they are. He can look where will they be in high school in 3 years or 4 years, whatever we're looking for in those answers. So it is really a highly scientific, planned, organized approach that we're using to come up with these numbers. So when you do your 5-year plan, it's based upon the best available information that we can get at this time. The unknown is the developments we do not know about yet. We shared this week with two major developers in Rutherford County and said, because our building program, if you're going to get 12,000 students in the next 10 years or so, you're looking at about a little over 1,000 students per kid, and we had a little over 1,200 students this year, new students enrolled in Rutherford County schools. And so we did ask those developers, what do you think about our plan of it's almost a school a year. It basically is a school a year. And they said that they thought we were on the conservative side of the estimate. So that just kind of lets you know.
Mr. Hodge?
Just looking at these, as far as this 6,800 lots, I just doing some figures here based on 7 students for 70%. We're looking at 4,700 students, which I don't know what the build out would be on these 6,800 lots, but I mean, you're talking about, even kind of 1,000 per school, you're talking about 5 schools. What would the build out be, you figure?
Well, it's that moving target again, but just to give you a kind of an idea of how big it can be, the Linwood subdivision I believe is getting ready to be annexed, that parcel, by the town of Smyrna, if not next week, the week after. And again, that's 1,500 proposed lots. Almost half of that, just to give you a picture of what kind of economic class is going to be in there and how quickly it's going to grow, almost half of it is townhomes. And one of the bigger areas we used, or that I used during the study, was the vineyards off of Rock Springs Road in Smyrna, and it gave I think an 86% result for one child, or like 0.86 children per house in that subdivision. And if you drive through there any time of the day, it's inundated with children.
That's what I was going to say. Townhomes, won't they bring more kids?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there'll be more in there because just because it doesn't cost as much to buy a home. And that's going to be an attraction for a young family.
I guess another thing that puts us behind the eight ball that we necessarily don't have, from a county standpoint, we don't have any control over is what the city does. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, Mr. Denosa, you probably correct me. What they propose or what they approve, it can have a big bearing on us, something that we necessarily don't have any say-so in. Is that correct? Or?
Mr. Hodge, you're absolutely correct. When it comes to planning and development within the municipalities, we don't have, the county doesn't have any say-so in those developments. That example of Linwood subdivision, they actually had come to us originally to look at that development. Even at the time, just right before the recession hit, they were looking to even extend sewer out that way, but keep it within the county, although I don't know if Smyrna would have let them do that even at that point. They also looked at the possibility of doing a step system out there, but the soils just weren't there for that. They would not get the yield that they wanted. So ultimately, that's why they went with Smyrna. So to answer your question, you're absolutely right. If it's within the town limits of Smyrna or one of the city limits, Murfreesboro, Laverne, or even Eagleville, they have their own separate process at that point.
But it's our job to educate all of them.
Yes, sir.
I commend you, Mr. Demasi, too, because the commissioners tell me that you give them plans similar to what we're looking at tonight. You tell them new subdivision lots, and they get that on a regular basis from you. So I think the public in Rutherford County can be very much assured that your county commissioners, your board, your people are looking at these numbers. We don't really have control over the numbers, but we are looking at the numbers.
I didn't think of this until Chairman Hodge brought it up, and I don't want to play sour grapes, but if I look at the map and I consider the development, and then in my mind I overlay the city limits of Murfreesboro, and then consider the divide of funding, that every time that we need some capital investment, there's a percentage of it that automatically has to go to Murfreesboro City, or there's something of that nature, that there's shared. K6, yeah. But the development is largely outside of Murfreesboro City. I don't know, that shared revenue or shared investment may not be reflective of where the impact really is.
Unfortunately, lawsuits have said otherwise. I 100% agree with you, but I'm afraid that battle is lost.
Okay.
Anybody else? Morgan, Mr. Bossy, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Some board members may have you on speed dial, Mr. Morgan. Number 10.
We follow right up with facilities, which is a building plan through 2021. The Director of Schools is preparing to take the approved building plan back to the Health and Education Committee, Rutherford County Commission, on February 29, 2016, as requested by the last Health and Education meeting. There have been some changes in this plan upon request from engineering, construction, and the school board. They are as follows. A, Smyrna Middle School renovation. Construction costs of the project were increased by $1,850,000, bringing the total construction cost to $7,850,000. This was requested due to a cost increase from relocating the current library media center that the town of Smyrna donated to Rutherford County Schools and has been used for the past several years. The new media center will be located within the new addition and accessible from the inside of the building. The existing library media center is remote and requires students to walk outside the classroom section of the campus to access it. The exposure to weather and student security requires this action. B, Laverne High School, Smyrna High School restroom and concessions. The bleachers have been pulled out of this line and relocated to their own line. The total was $2 million, but now the Laverne High School, Smyrna High School restroom concessions is shown at $1,500,000, and the Laverne High School, Smyrna High School bleachers are shown at $500,000. This makes the cost clearer and indicates the school board's priority for these projects. Recommend approval. The motion is to approve the changes of the Rutherford County Schools building program through 2021 by adding $1,850,000 to the construction cost of Smyrna Middle School renovation, bringing the construction cost to $7,850,000, and bringing the total cost for that project to $9,371,000 as presented. Also, pulling the $500,000 bleacher cost out of the Laverne High School, Smyrna High School restroom concessions and reducing that line to $1,500,000 and creating a separate line for the bleachers as presented.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. I have a question if it's seconded.
Mr. Gordon? Mr. Hodge, second.
The building that Town of Smyrna donated to Rutherford County, what are we going to do with that building? Do we get to keep it, first of all? It doesn't revert back to them, does it?
I haven't researched that, but I'm not aware of any revision in that contract. Are you, Mr. Reed, or anything like that? I was not aware of it, but I don't know. North Rutherford Teacher Center.
Well, I hate to waste it. It's as far as I know, it's a pretty good building. We were in it last spring. But the problem is that it's so far away, weather-wise and steps-wise, from the main building, that this moving the new media center into the Smyrna building proper is certainly appropriate, I would think.
It'd be an excellent training center for that end of the county, too. One of our issues is ours stays so booked here. It holds about 70, and it's an issue as we get larger and larger, and 30 to 40% of our students are on that end, and it would be very easy to do duplicate trainings or try to meet that. I don't think it'll be an issue using it. It actually gives us additional flexibility to do trainings, I think.
Motion is second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 11.
Number 11, also under financial matters, school meal price increases for the 2016-2017 school year. Rutherford County School Nutrition Program last increased its school meal prices for the 2008-2009 school year, when our lunch prices were set at $2 for elementary schools and $2.25 for middle and high schools. We have been operating under a waiver since the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010 was passed, and have been able to hold the lunch price. The State Department of School Nutrition and the federal government will no longer issue these waivers for exemption of lunch price increases. In accordance with the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010, we are now required to increase lunch prices until the difference between the free reimbursement of $3.13 and the paid reimbursement, 35 cents, is established as a paid meal price of $2.78. We don't have to go all the way up to the $2.80 in 1 year. We plan to spread the increase over multiple years. However, our first increase needs to be 25 cents for lunch. Please remember that the required minimum price for paid lunches will continue to increase most years because reimbursement rate goes up. We propose the following school lunch prices to meet the HHFKA of 2010 for the 2016-17 school year. Elementary prices $2.25, middle and high schools $2.50. With this change, we'll also be required to increase teacher and visitor teacher price to $3.25. The teacher price needs to include the highest paid meal price, $2.50, plus reimbursement rate for paid meals of 35 cents, plus USDA commodity reimbursement 33 cents, which equals $3.18. The current teacher price is $3. Visitor prices would be set at $3.50. The holiday meal at $5. Recommend approval. The motion is to set the 2016-2017 school lunch prices at $2.25 for elementary, $2.50 for middle and high school, and $3.25 for teachers $3.50 for visitors, and $5 for visitor holiday meals as presented. As explained Tuesday evening, when supplements USDA or the USDA provides some additional to student lunches, we could not apply those to adult lunches. They do not subsidize adult lunches. So that's why you have to charge more for teachers or other people that are in the building to meet that requirement. So
You've heard the recommendation.
So moved.
Mr. Hodge?
Second.
Mr. Holliday? Again, we had discussion on Tuesday. Further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 12.
Number 12 is for information only from Transportation. The Transportation Department has put on the last bus out of 6 that were budgeted for the 2015-2016 school year. This brings our total fleet to 249 buses. There have been 2 contracts turned in since the beginning of the school year. This puts us at the number 6 out of 67 on the second priority list. For the 6 days in the month of February, we hosted the area state-required safety and service training for all drivers conducted by the state pupil transportation state troopers. These troopers also inspect all buses each year, re-inspect buses which have been involved in accidents. We had 15 accidents and 4 injuries through January 2016, compared to 16 accidents and 5 injuries through January 2015. In the bus fleet, we have 216 transit buses, 33 special education sped buses, and after 15 years of age, all transit buses can get a 3-year extension. Buses that have obtained a 3-year extension are required to be inspected twice a year by the state pupil transportation inspectors at a cost of $770 per year borne by the contractor. Sped buses are not eligible for the extension. Below is a breakdown of our fleet by years of age, and you can see those numbers. Buses can run until the end of the 18th year with unlimited mileage. After the 18th year, the bus can run until it reaches 200,000 miles, at which point it must be removed from service.
Information only.
Mr. Snell's here if you have a question.
Do we see any issues in the future with our growth as far as filling these bus routes that we'll be adding on?
Well, we're having some of the same issues that many of the districts that employ their own drivers of finding drivers. The contractors are out vigilantly looking for people that they can train. We have, at the present time, we have one route that we're having issues with where the contractor's having to use subs versus having a regular driver on that route. But out of 249, that's not too bad. I know a lot of the other districts are having more issues than that. I don't anticipate it being any different than it was this year. I mean, we were able to get enough drivers for all the routes, but it is an ongoing struggle. As the economy is better, there are other jobs that they tend to go to. So trucking industry is the same way from the standpoint of it is always looking for more CDL qualified drivers, and so it'll be a struggle, but we've been doing pretty well by utilizing the contract system.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anybody else? Okay, 13, the insurance meeting is next week? Next Thursday. I do plan to attend. 14, Chairman Hodge, any discussion on TLN?
I don't have anything. I guess tell each board member to wait around till tomorrow and we'll get a report from TSBA, I guess, like we do normally, and then I'll get Mr. Odom, if you get something, toss.
Yes, sir.
You send it to us. More or less let us know what we're doing, what's going on next week. 'Cause we won't meet till the week after that, I guess. don't have anything new.
The one that we're most interested is still laying on the clerk's desk, so until they take a vote or...
All I can tell you, stay awake.
Yes, sir. Eyes wide open. Any questions for Chairman Hodge?
Well, I'll just take the opportunity to appreciate the partnership that we have, and we did discuss this some Tuesday night, but getting the voucher bill onto the clerk's desk, it was a group effort, and in the boardroom tonight, the immediate past president, the president, and the incoming president of our Teachers Association, and Mr. Gifford had a nice editorial on the topic that was published along the way. Everyone's efforts there are greatly appreciated, and we do have to stay vigilant.
It is a team effort, partners. Okay. Anything to add on 15, Mr. Holliday, with the Federal Relations Network?
I'll just highlight that we're not accustomed to watching committees other than the education committees, but we need to pay attention to the U.S. Senate Agricultural Committee right now, who is considering changes to the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act that we talked about a little bit earlier tonight. We've been working in waivers. It is indicative, maybe it started in Washington, to set outrageously high standards and then work in a status of waivers from those standards. This standard for school lunches said mandated 80% of grains had to be whole grains, the inclusion of fresh fruits and vegetables, and anti-sodium levels, and we saw kids reject the lunches. Now, we've done a great job in Rutherford County of giving students something that they can enjoy, and we haven't seen a large amount of waste, but they are taking a look at that from a legislative perspective, a federal legislation, to put in place real and reasonable expectations in that program, and moving away from a standard that really doesn't work, and then these waivers, individual waivers that are individually negotiated from the non-elected Department of Education.
I would like to say for our public also, they even mandate the portion size. And I know from my own grandson and what I hear from others, these middle school and high school athletes, they're hungry, especially when they have to go and then practice in the afternoon after school. But we are checked, and they measure what we do, and the number of ounces and all is controlled out of Washington again. It's not our prerogative.
Anybody else? Okay, we're at general discussion by board members. Anybody have anything?
I'd like for Ms. Barnes to share a couple of things. One, you did attend last Monday when we were off as a district. Actually, you and Ms. Duke attended a recruitment fair in Nashville. Would you kind of share who was there at the recruitment fair and some of what you saw?
We did. This was a consortium of Tribeca, Belmont, Lipscomb, Vanderbilt, some TSU students, and actually some MTSU students that chose to attend on that day. And it was a session primarily for those teacher prep candidates with information presented by different instructors. But we had an opportunity to speak to the students and encourage them about applying for positions in our school system. There were 7 school systems represented that afternoon, so we each had about 5 minutes to talk about our school systems, promote the positive things going on, and talk about applications and possible employment with Rutherford County Schools. So it was a good day. Ms. Duke actually went the next night to Lipscomb to a session specifically for that university. And of course, our job fair is scheduled for this Saturday, February 20th at Siegel High School from 9 until 11. We have emailed out to the 8,000 active employees that are in our database and our application system, reminding them about the job fair and encourage them to consider Rutherford County Schools for employment. We've sent reminders out to all of our local universities across the state of Tennessee and surrounding states to those career development centers at those universities and ask them to pass our message along. So we really hope to have a good turnout on Saturday, specifically for our middle school and high school principals as they seek candidates for positions for next year.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. I have a couple of things. Anyone else have anything before? Attended the Essex School Board Association Day on the Hill, where we contact legislators, and was honored and privileged to see Smyrna High School, two ladies from their choral group sang the national anthem prior to our speakers, and I had the opportunity to listen to the ladies out in the hallway before they ever came into the banquet hall, and sounded like angels, and certainly did with the national anthem, which is sometimes a little difficult to sing, and they did a great job. And also the Smyrna Color Guard presented colors, and they were very crisp and perfection. So very proud of Smyrna High School. And with Mr. Evans today, attended a session at Stewart's Creek Middle School, a sixth grade there, had a program, correct me if I misstep, Mr. Evans, to write your congressman. And the sixth graders there all wrote Congressman Desjardins, and he returned the favor by coming today and speaking to them and taking questions from several of the sixth graders. And prior to their questions, he reminded them of the issues that he had as a student in that middle school at time. And it was kind of ironic that the things he was concerned about are, several years later, are still the things that they're concerned about. Testing and cafeteria food and recess, and it's just, am I correct with that, Mr. Evans? Pretty close. So, but it was very nice of Congressman Desjardins to take quite a bit of time out of his day to come and be with and speak to those sixth graders at Stewart's Creek Middle.
Mr. Zago, myself, and Mr. Duke attended yesterday in Nashville the governor's rollout of the reading program. It's kind of interesting to hear him and the others talk about it. Of course, we now have Tennessee Promise, but then we discover that there's a good number of children that really do not have the reading skills they need to really use all of the features of Tennessee Promise. So there's a focus on refocusing on reading. The state's going to put in coaches. We've had with our RTI coaches, which we're a step ahead. They're going to do that at the state level to help train other districts and people to have coaches, reading coaches and all for their own. But for the people for grandparents and parents that might be listening to us at night, it was a very interesting statistic that I've heard some of this before. It really caught my attention. One is that by age 4, 80% of a child's brain is developed. By the time they start kindergarten at 5, it's 90%. And that a young child is adding every second, they said, from 700 to 1,000 synapses in their brain at that very, very young age. I say all this to say that there really has to be a push from Tennessee, and I hope from our district and others too. The goal is we need to read to these children. Parents, we're asking parents, please read to your child at least 20 minutes per day. We've got books from birth. The Imagination Library, Tennessee is a hit on this, but we really, if that much of the brain is developed by 4 and 5 before we even get them, it's just critical that parents and grandparents, we all partner together. And books from birth or the Imagination, the library is free if you have a child that can register for that. and your child would be mailed a book every month, you know, and it gives you something put in your hands to read. So it kind of opened my eyes again to the total education of the child really starts very, very young. And the governor's goal is, and the state's goal is by 2025 to have 75% of our third graders reading on grade level. If you kind of look at even the old TCAP last year, that number was more like 46 to 48%. So the goal is that many things we do together to try to, because at the third grade is that point where so many things happen after that. So anyway, you're going to hear more about this. Dollar General gave them $1 million check yesterday to help promote this, which was great. So I think you may see some advertisements. Dolly Parton's going on country music television and do some commercials for this, and also you're going to be seeing it and hearing about it, but it's for real. If that much of the brain development comes before school, we've got to partner with families for our kids. It's our future, it's Tennessee's future, and it sure would help us in the educational community overall.
Thank you, Mr. Odom. Anybody else?
I'll just mention, I didn't really think about this, but Sunday afternoon coming, at 3 p.m. at Stewart's Creek High School, the Ethos Philharmonic Orchestra has a concert that I'm planning on attending. And it's kind of an honor orchestra from across the county and even beyond our county, but it's taking place here and has a lot of community support. Before our board gets together again on March the 1st, there is a benefit concert for that organization that'll be an opera performance at the Center for the Arts, and we don't get that opportunity very often. And if anyone was interested, I happen to also be a board member of that organization.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday. Ms. Moore, did you have something?
If I may take a moment, I'd like to just address Ms. Hall real quickly. May I do that, or?
Well, sure.
Okay, well, I just wanted to thank her. Ms. Hall, I appreciate your coming here this evening to talk to us. You and I had spoken before, and you're a parent in my district, and I think it's so important for parents to express their concerns when they have them to the board. I know, and I hope you don't mind my sharing, you're a single mom, you've got 3 kids, you work a full-time job, so I applaud you for being here tonight. I think you know that I harbor your same concerns about all the testing issues. And just want you to continue doing the things that you're doing because your children are going to be blessed, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Anybody else? Okay. When are we together next? Saturday, that's right. Yeah, Saturday at 8:30, a tour of Smyrna Middle and David Urey and possibly the concessions. So if we have them, we'll take them where we need to take them. Nothing else, we stand adjourned.